This is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel, and this is Thoughts Incongruous, TI, Aliens, the Paradox. And one of the things I'm referring to is the Fermi paradox, which of course you know is the idea that if there were aliens, why haven't we seen them? Because logically speaking, if they were advanced enough, even as human beings, in 100 million years, they would have colonized the galaxy. Of course, you've got to say, well, maybe they don't want to colonize the galaxy. Maybe that's not their thing. And there's lots of other reasons as well. But anyway, that's kind of where we're talking here. Let's start as to kind of generating reasons that I think aliens may be real. I'm just going to sit there and go, aliens may be real. They may exist. I haven't actually seen an alien. I have seen some UFOs. But maybe as I talk, it'll generate some ideas and thoughts about aliens. And I want to be a little bit sensitive about this because I'm kind of interacting with some groups that are interested in maybe contacting or getting closer to ETs if they exist. And they're great people. I don't want to upset them, you know, and I want to keep trying myself. So there we are. All right. So we know that in 1945, atomic bombs were dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the first one was detonated in the Trinity site in the deserts of New Mexico. And I've been there, but not to the site itself. I've actually went around the top of the White Sands. I think it's White Sands weapons test area. And then down to the Alamogordo side, which is where Roswell is, and I've been to Roswell. Yeah, it's there, and that site was the site of hundreds, perhaps even thousands, of nuclear bomb tests. All right. Now it's interesting, isn't it, that that was the first one that was dropped in the Trinity site. And then that was followed by the two in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we could discuss whether those bombs were necessary to end the World War II, whether it would have been enough that the Russians were coming down from the north. Maybe that was the reason the bombs were dropped, as much as to end the war and prevent a very costly invasion of Japan, but also to send a message to the Russians and say, look what we've got. You know, don't mess with us, whatever, because it was the time of the Cold War, start of the Cold War. But anyway, so it is interesting. And I, as far as Roswell's concerned, is who knows? It was an awful long time ago. There were so many different things said. All I know is it's hard to accept that military personnel couldn't tell the difference between a flying disc, because that was what was reported in the newspaper, I think by a colonel in the military, and obviously he had men and stuff like this, and then the next day it was retracted and say it was fabric from a balloon. Well, there's a lot of difference between a flying disc and a piece of fabric, whether that was from a weather balloon or a top secret mogul project balloon. Doesn't really matter, does it? I'm sure a colonel in the military is going to know the difference between the two, but there we are. We move on, don't we? The interesting thing was that nuclear testing increased. And if we'd woken up ETs around that time and said, you know, hey, well, we didn't send a message to them, but they went, what are these people doing? And there's all these nuclear tests, more and more, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It wasn't just the United States, of course. Russia was doing it as well, and then China. The UK, of course, doing everything that the Americans did. You know, and just blowing the hell out of our planet. In 1954, the year I was born, there was the Castle Bravo test in Bikini Atoll, which caused 11,000 square kilometers of radiation fallout. 11,000 square kilometers. Why? Isn't it enough to destroy the planet many times over? No, we got to get bigger than that. Bigger than the Russians have got anyway, or the Chinese, or the British. Whatever. I keep my mind goes elsewhere. I want to say, because of course the British came in late because the United States basically didn't trust them, because there were British spies on the cooperative build up towards the bomb and all that stuff like this, that were actually selling some of those secrets to the Russians. That was British. And the Americans turned around and said, we're going to stop sharing this stuff with you. And it took a while for the British to crawl back into that situation again and be able to share technology and stuff like that. So not very good for the British. Good job we haven't got a liar in charge of us now, right? Anyway, that was Castle Bravo test, and they kept increasing the size of the tests, the almost adventurism of the test, because a lot of the time they didn't know what was going to happen. And they did this whole Operation Fishbowl. And I think the Russians were doing something similar as well, because they noticed that when they were doing the other tests, there was this electromagnetic pulse, EMP, that was produced that could be useful in time of war, because that's all you got to think about is war. And because what it did was it shut down communications or made communications difficult. So could that be used to shut down an enemy's communication while we were moving our troops in to kill a lot of them before they killed a lot of us? God. Anyway, so they were looking at this, and they did this as part of the Operation Fishbowl. It decided this one piece which was called Starfish Prime, and I remember it because it's such a cool name. It's like one of the Transformers, isn't it? Starfish Prime. And it was a 1.5 megaton thermonuclear bomb that they decided they'd fire out in the upper atmosphere, the ionosphere, Van Allen belt, whatever that is up there. Now, they didn't know what would happen. And when you think about it, the Earth is in such a Goldilocks zone. Not too close, not too far, not too hot, not too cold, not too dry, not too wet. All of these not tos. The moon's got to be there, all this kind of thing. I mean, they were even talking about maybe getting contact, seeing if there's contact with others out in space by putting a nuclear weapon on the dark side of the moon and exploding it to send a message out to space. And then one scientist actually came up with a suggestion, let's just take the whole kind of pantry or storehouse of nuclear weapons and put them all on the dark side of the moon and blow them up, because if there's any ATs out there, they're bound to see it. And it's like, but don't you realize the moon is one of the reasons that Earth exists as it is, providing life for human beings and all the other creatures on the planet? You don't mess with things like that, but well, there's a scientific interest, so of course they do, and a military interest, which makes it even more certain it's going to happen. So they send off Starfish Prime. It causes a massive EMP pulse, much more than they ever expected. And of course, it trashed communications, it burnt out telephone lines up to about 2,000 mile diameter. It also took out a third, so I believe, check this out, a third of all communication satellites that were already up there, including the first communication satellite ever out there called Telstar. If you're old like me, you'll remember the song Telstar by the Tornadoes, wasn't it? Gone, or at least damaged so that it couldn't be used. I can't remember the name of it, but the first one the British ever put up there was also made useless by this burst. And of course the Americans negotiated with everybody and told them exactly what they were doing. No, they didn't. Of course they didn't. They don't do that. It's just like, oh, well, it's like the World Series of Baseball. It's the world. Yeah, it's us. We're the world. Anyway, so that's what happened. And they'd already started talking about, after, what was it, the Castle Bravo test, they'd already started talking and saying, you know, we probably maybe should limit these tests or not? Or did they get a little poke from some other source? Did the ET say, you know, guys, you need to stop doing this? But it wasn't until, I think, it wasn't until Starfish Prime and there were a whole set of experiments like that, right on the edge of the atmosphere, right on the edge of the solar system and the galaxy. It wasn't until they started doing that and sort of affecting the cosmos outside of the planet, outside of the atmosphere, in somebody else's department, or at least shared part of the universe, that maybe they attracted attention and the ET said, oh guys, you got to stop. Because around that time you also got various events of where UFOs were around military bases and shut down ICBM missiles and shut down Minutemen on stuff like this. And is that coincidence? Maybe. And the same thing happened in Russia, I think, except instead of shutting them down, they activated them and took them up in their alert state. Basically saying, you know, we can control these things. You need to listen. And then in 1964, you can see online, on video, a ICBM test going up with a test nuclear warhead fitted to it, and something, an unidentified flying object, coming in and firing beams of light at it, 4 beams of light, and destroying it or knocking it down or whatever. And you got to wonder, trying to send a message and saying, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. So eventually, after fits and starts and stops, and the US and the Russia that were talking to each other, which is extraordinary in itself during the Cold War, but then they came up with this limited nuclear test ban, which limited it, no testing in space, in the atmosphere, and in the oceans. Underground was okay, and they couldn't detect it properly anyway. So that was kind of let go. And then eventually all the other countries like the UK, Israel, who else you got? French, India, Pakistan, even North Korea came in line and said, fair enough. Don't know about North Korea, but they haven't done, I don't think they've done atmospheric tests. So maybe somebody told them, Donald Trump, when he was over there, said, hey, Kim Jong, don't blow any of these things up in the atmosphere, because you're going to have E.T. and his brothers coming down to kick your backside. But anyway, so that may have been what happened, the E.T.s. Now, so you've got all of that. I mean, it was got so bad that, you know, they do like carbon-14 testing to measure the age of archaeological objects and stuff like that. There's a point in that testing which they call post-bomb and pre-bomb, because the rise of carbon-14 in the atmosphere went up so much during all that nuclear testing that it made a mark in this idea of radiocarbon dating. Well, when you think about that all this testing actually has changed the atmosphere of the planet, the whole thing, it's like, what are you guys doing? Stop it. Anyway, they did stop it, sort of, right? Sort of. But you'll also see that there are videos of UFOs being shot at. Now, that could be just like normal conflict. I got a bit of a scratchy throat. My throat's never been right since COVID. That was almost 2 years ago now. Anyway, and so you would see something shooting at unidentified flying objects. Who knows what they were? Could have been enemies, I suppose. But There are videos of these things. If you've ever seen the film, or seen or heard of the film, I wrote it down here, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Very interesting, won some awards and stuff like this. It was a B movie for sure, but the concept was just this idea. Let me quickly say, UFO comes down, flying saucer. Guy gets out, giant robot gets out. Guys come down to warn the Earth that they've got to be careful what they're doing with nuclear testing and all this kind of thing. They chase him around and all this kind of thing. Eventually they kill him. He says this famous alien phrase, which I thought, Classferatu Neptu, something like that anyway, to the robot, or she does, his person he's befriended. And he goes away and he says, well, we're going to go off and consider now, because you've got two choices. We'll destroy you or you comply. Now, if you were an ET, right, because it's like, well, okay, where are the ETs now? Well, maybe they're just up there watching. How come we haven't seen them? Well, we do see them. There's plenty of videos of things flying around and different things. We've seen gun cameras. We've seen all kinds of evidence that there's something going on, right? And maybe the ETs are fundamentally different from us. Maybe they're not even physical. Maybe they're actual energetic. You should listen to my series on energy being everything, which is also on the Incongruous YouTube site. Anyway, but let's assume they're already here. Let's assume that they are able there to sit there and watch and go, you know, it's too dangerous to go down there. These humans are going to start shooting at us and this kind of thing, and we don't want anything to do with that. Even though we've got armor and shields and stuff, we still don't want to get involved in that. And it also says something about, why would we want to be friends with these people? And the sad thing is, and you'll probably agree with me on this, is that 99.8, let's throw a number at it, of the people on this planet will be fine with it. We'd like to meet some aliens. We'd like to improve our planet. We'd like to get some higher technology off them so that we could improve things, so that we could stop global warming, climate change, all of that stuff. But the 0.2% that are actually in control, who've created a system that keeps us in control, and the open-minded, active-minded ones of us who have time and the ability and the resources to be able to consider and think about these things, would say, no, that needs to change, there's something wrong with it. But the vast majority of people who just survive every day, you know, all the way from down in, you know, terrible situations in the Far East and Africa and places like that, all the way up to poor people in supposedly civilized nations like ours, right? They don't have time to sit and think about these things because they got to get to work and they got to get the kids out and they got to do this and that and make the food and all of this. So no, the 0.2% are in control. They're the ones that need to change, not the rest of us. So we'd all be open to this. But that's what the ETs would see, is what the 0.2% have forced it to do. They've created wars, they've created tragedies, they've created climate change, basically. They're the ones responsible for the things spewing out carbon dioxide, methane, and all that kind of stuff into the atmosphere. That's what needs to change. And they may sit back and go, look, if they can't even manage their own planet, we ain't going to go down and get friendly with them. We're just going to sit up and watch, because they need to stay out of our neighborhood. They need to not bring any problems with us. And it kind of scares me a bit when you hear about this DART mission where they're going out, it's a NASA DART mission, look it up, where they're sending out an impactor to hit an asteroid to see what will happen. For a good reason. Near-Earth objects hitting the Earth, that kind of thing. Asteroid strikes like the one that killed the dinosaurs. But the one that killed the dinosaurs was something like 12 kilometers across, and a little old impactor ain't going to move that puppy. And if you look on NASA's chart of how you deal with different sized asteroids, as soon as you get above a certain size, about a kilometer, it's all nuclear. So you're going to send nuclear weapons, or that's the plan, to send nuclear weapons out in space with Bruce Willis on the top, right? And blow this thing apart into 2 6-kilometer asteroids. Oh, seriously? You need to do better than that. But anyway, that's the problem, you see. And then the ETs are going to see, oh, look, here comes a spaceship from Earth with a nuclear weapon on board. This is what we feared all the way along, you see. Other than that, they just sit back. Not like the day the Earth stood still. They just sit back and watch because they can see the problems we're causing, and perhaps the seeds of our own destruction have already been sown. That's terrible, isn't it? That's terrible. So what I see is people trying to communicate, trying to send messages of hope and peace and all this kind of thing, and say, look, 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 look. We're the 99.8%. We're good people. We want to be your friends. You could trust us to be your friends. Why don't you give us a hand to deal with this alert? Why don't you give us a hand to deal with the 0.2%? Wouldn't that be cool? I mean, I, for one, are going to continue with my efforts to try and observe UFOs, ETs, and communicate, whatever. At least find out if it's for real, verify what I think is true, but I'm not sure. And there we are. I just wanted to put that out there, that it does seem that historically, when you look back to the 50s, the 60s, and so on, it might be that that is actually some kind of verification of the idea that ETs have been around and that they have communicated. Maybe not directly. Maybe they've just said, look what we can do. Here's the UFOs. Here's CBMs being shut down or shot down. You know? Here it is. You know, we're doing the day the Earth stood still. We don't actually have to send somebody because we can show you. I mean, in the movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, I think to prove that he had that kind of juice, the power to do that, he shut down the electrical systems across the world for 30 minutes. He kept the hospitals and so on going, but the rest of them, he just shut them all down and said, there you go. Told you we got the stuff. Now you need to believe me and do as we're told. And of course, they still shot him. And you know, if an ET came to Earth, even if the government and the deep state and the corporate entities and all this stuff said, fine, bring them, we won't hurt them, let's talk to them, let's try and be friends, let's see what we can do. There'd be some whack job with a long rifle saying, they're demons from hell, they're Satan, boom. You know this would happen, right? So they don't come down. They don't communicate. They sit and they watch to see if we will eventually destroy ourselves, or will we resolve the situation ourselves? And that's the key. It'd be great if they helped. I'll keep asking them to help, but I'm not sure if they will. But we need to do it. And I was talking with my partner this morning about this, and or something related to this, and other examples of maybe how things are changing. Maybe something like the virus that's going on. And now we're starting to get past the sort of, because it was terrible, a lot of people dying, that's terrible. But now we're starting to get past that, and they're pulling back the rug and going, well, yeah, there were side effects, and there were other deaths, and there were this, and there were that. And it may have been created by funding from this country and only created over there because it was cheap, and just starting to get more and more information. And hopefully the people, remember I talked about the people who are got to go to work every day and everything, will get the idea that there's more to this than meets the eye, and that we do need to make major changes to the system that we have at the moment. That's the problem. Not necessarily the people in the system, but the system itself, because the system itself can't cope for itself. Certainly here in the UK, we're seeing that right now. The system, which perhaps used to be protected by honesty and honesty and trustworthiness and responsibility and integrity and stuff like that. If you get people in that system who haven't got those qualities, they can just ride right through it, because there are no rules to shut them down. They're being expected to act in a certain way and they simply don't. What do? The system won't allow it. So the system needs to change. And we humans need to change it. Maybe the ETs will help us. We got to ask them, haven't we? Or try. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting how the history went from the right at the back, and then Roswell, and then all those, you know, the UFO sightings and stuff, and even the gun scam stuff and the tic-tac and all that stuff. It all ties together, it seems to me, to indicate that there has been a presence for all this time, that they have sent a message and said, stop it, stop what you're doing. And right now they're just sitting there watching and going, well, you know, these guys could take care of it one way or the other. They could fix it for themselves, in which case we'll come down and become friends with them, or they could fix it by just destroying themselves. And then we, sat out here in the galaxy, don't have the problem anymore. And as a human being, I know which option I'd choose. We need to fix it. Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. Check out my theory of energy being everything. It's 8 20-minute shows. Just put them on your headset. There's nothing to see, just me waving my hands about and stuff. But you can put it on your headset, listen to it as you're driving to work, whatever. Anyway, please take care.